So welcome everyone. I'm glad to see you all here. My name's Leah Parkhill-Riley. I'm the practice lead for coaching and I'm executive coach here at the Roundtable. So really welcome you on it's going to be an interactive exercise on the topic of teams and missed targets and the impact of energy and bias on our results. So let's move that slide along. At the Roundtable, really, one of our core values is make an impact. And so as part of our own commitment to ongoing reconciliation in January 2022, we partnered with the charity Inspire. And Inspire is a national Indigenous registered charity. It invests in the education of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis for the long-term benefit of their families and communities. And so to honor the legacy of Kamloops at 215, we are striving to provide 215 university scholarships over the next 5 years. If you'd like to learn more about that or make a donation to help us achieve that goal, you can contact Claudia, whose information is on the screen. I'd like to now respectfully acknowledge that in Toronto, we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. Toronto is the home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and I encourage you to acknowledge the land on which you currently reside as well. All right, we're going to move to our next slide. So I would love for you to drop in the chat where you're coming from. So what is your role, your area of expertise? We want to know who's in the room as we explore a specific tool. And it's an interactive experience. So again, if something's occurring to you as we go through, please raise a hand or throw it in the chat. But let us know where you are coming from in terms of your experiences or your role. We've got some independent coaches, I know. Nice team leads. Got HR. Okay. Oh, lots of different experiences here as I'm looking at our chat. Great. Thank you, everyone. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we've got a lot of familiar faces, but some new folks. So just a quick introduction to us at the Roundtable. So our mandate, our goal is to help results-driven leaders really break through limitations and build exceptional leadership, performance, and culture. We tend to work with mid-sized enterprise level organizations that really are interested in investing in their people. And our clients are typically very forward-thinking business leaders in HR or senior leaders who understand that transformation requires commitment, collaboration, and bold action. So we go beyond traditional leadership development. Our programs are far from generic or one size fits all. So we have a tested and adaptable framework that helps our organization optimize the passion and potential of high value leaders and unleash the power of teams and really build an environment where people want to stay and thrive. And that's what we call unleashing collective impact. And so it's about transforming organizations from the inside out. And so where we're going today is really the way we do it, I should say, is through three methods: group coaching, team coaching, and one-to-one coaching. And our focus today is on our team coaching practice and some insights gleaned through one of our case studies. And the individual who's going to be leading us through that case study is our founder, Ms. Glyne Roberts McCabe. I'm going to pass the microphone over to her, and she'll take us through the conversation.
Well, good morning, everyone. Have you ever had one of those mornings where everything seems to domino like in the wrong direction? That was my morning today. So I'm just thrilled to see you, Carrie LaMarche. It's so nice to see your face. I see you on the screen. Great to see you. And I see a number of my coaching clients, Randy, and a number of like great friends from the community here. So I'm excited about that. You know, the Roundtable, what we're known for is really sort of this platform where we exchange ideas together, right? Like this is a place to come together to talk about things. If you've been through any of our programs, you know we have a big confidentiality rule. It's like the Vegas rule. What's said at the roundtable stays at the roundtable. So I want you to think about that today. These talent talks are really designed for us to Those of us who are in senior leadership roles, talent professionals, look at, things through different angles, right? And so sometimes we bring in guest speakers. Sometimes we're going to share some of the work that we're doing. So welcome everyone. And those of you that are in the independent coaching community, welcome to you too. I hope that you find a lot of interesting sort of ideas and tools in today's presentation. Because really what we're here to do is to kind of look beyond, the typical team building, teamwork kinds of activities, right? And so that I'm excited to explore this with all of you. I thought I'd start with a little bit of a poll around teams, where you're at with teams. And those of you who are maybe now on the independent side of the fence, I want you to think back to when you were on a team. And here's the poll. I'm going to get Claudia to launch it. And the question is this: you've been on a team where you seem to talk a lot about certain goals, but never seem to achieve them. And you got two yes answers. Yes, and yes, I'm on one right now, or never. Never been on one, never experienced that. We always smashed every goal we ever set for ourselves. Man, I'd love to know teams that did that actually. All right, so I see the results coming in. And what do we got? Like it looks like I think we've got everyone's answer. So let's end that poll. Looks like about 70% said yes, they've been on the
It's a
team,
yes and
and
yes.
30% are on that team now.
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes, a big rounding yes. Yeah, it's so tricky. So here's the thing, right? Like you're not alone on this issue. It can often feel, I find, a lot like, and this is my favorite movie of all time, which I made my family watch recently, Groundhog Day. My husband said to me, "How is this your favorite movie of all time?" I don't know what it is about it. I just love the idea of like being able to like perfect yourself in different disciplines with no consequence. But it is like Groundhog Day sometimes, right? As teams, where we're really, we talk about the same thing year after year after year, and yet we never seem to hit it. And so here's some maybe heartening news for you if you've been experiencing that. Is this was done by the Economist Group, and what they did was they did some research and analysis, and what they wanted to study was the gap between the strategic goals that companies set for themselves and actual execution. So they surveyed 500 executives that were in companies that had annual revenues of over $1 billion. And they found, and I want you to kind of guess in the chat if you're up for this, how many of those companies failed to reach their strategic goals, do you think? Like if you were to throw a number at it, would it be 20% of the companies? Would it be 40% of the companies? What do you think? So Tanya's saying 50, 60. Billy says 80. 75, 50, 75, 80. Dee, I love your
Majority.
hedging your bet, majority. Yeah. Okay, so Dee's the closest. She wins the prize. It was 90%. 90% failed to reach all their strategic goals. So I want you in the chat now. Why do you think teams tend to fall short? Like if you could think of some reasons why we don't hit our goals, what comes to mind for you? And if you want to come off mute and just shout it out, feel free.
Squirrel.
Yeah.
That's
Unclear
exactly it.
expectations, lack of trust amongst the team. Love it. Clarity, failure to allocate the right resources, people. Yes. We're focused on the day to day, keeping the lights on. Yeah. Those short term
Mhm.
burning fires, right? Unclear accountabilities. Oh my gosh. You guys, you know what? You guys could all have big roles at big independent consulting firms, I think. Yeah. So here's what
Mhm.
Harvard Business found were the kind of key drivers around why teams didn't achieve goals. So one was unclear direction, that would often lead to kind of conflicting values and conflicting priorities. That was one of them. The other was senior leaders who either didn't have kind of alignment and trust within the team or haven't acknowledged the need to change their own behaviors, right? So they didn't acknowledge that they had some stuff of their own stuff to work on. One of the things we talk about at the roundtable a lot with senior leadership is you got to get over your ego, man. Like you've got to start leaning into vulnerability. So egos, I have a consulting friend who says your ego is not your amigo. And it's very true, right? Another one is this idea of teams not being comfortable sharing what's going on with senior leaders. Like kind of keeping it quiet, not sharing what's happening kind of further down the chain. The unclear direction, which you all sort of talked about, or shifting directions, changing things. We often see it when I work with executive teams. We'll often see this concept of one team is really a tricky concept for executive teams sometimes because there's different priorities around the table. And so, that can cause like this internal tensions. And if they're not addressed, creates that spin. I was with the team yesterday. Well, that was one of the comment that was made by, it was the head of IT said, well, I'm kind of working on my thing over here, but I don't know, I don't actually know if that's part of the broader strategic priority. It's important for my team, but I'm not sure about the rest of the team. I think that's pretty common, right? Another thing is not putting time into talent, right? Not putting time into thinking about what kind of talent you need, where talent should be. Again, another team we're working with recently is they're kind of overstaffed in one area, and in the critical part of the business, they're not staffed well enough. And so that team's not hitting their targets, and it's really critical. And then another piece that was a big driver that Harvard found was sort of these unclear organizational changes. So structural changes that affect the ability for the business to move the way it's meant to move. And interestingly enough, Ruth Wegeman, who is a big researcher in team coaching, she has kind of this model where she looks at what are the essential conditions for team coaching, or for teams, I should say, team effectiveness, and what are the supporting conditions. And one of the big three supporting conditions is the right structure. And structure accounts actually for 70% of the issues that will bubble up on the team. So it's something to think about for those of you in talent, for those of you who maybe are looking at your team and looking at the structure of your team. Start with structure because often that's what can contribute to a lot of these other issues that we see. So again, got another poll for you. Of those sort of key ones that Harvard's identified, which are the ones that you've experienced? What have you experienced directly? So look, Claudia's launched that poll for me. Yeah, great. Let's see. I think we only gave you one choice on this one. I'm not sure, so you might have to pick the top one. Or did you pick more? It looks like more, right?
Yeah.
Oh, lack of honest
Great.
conversations about problems. That is such a huge one, right? People don't think they're going to be listened to, or that ego thing for senior leaders. Again, I was working with the team yesterday, and that was one of the things I said to them. Often when you get to the senior point, you get too far removed from actually what's going on, and the speed of business is so fast these days. You need to have a mechanism for keeping connected, I think. Any surprises in there for you, Leah? What you're seeing coming in on the poll?
I have to say no. I think the lack of the honest conversation really is at the root of a lot of teams because it feels like conflict for a lot of individuals. I think ego is for sure one thing, but I think it's also a feeling like it's conflict and it's stirring things up, and you don't want to air grievances in front of everyone, and so it just festers.
Yeah.
Um, I think we've got everyone's answered now.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. So here's the thing about all these things, though, when you kind of look at them, there's a behavioral anchor outside of the structure piece, but there's sort of a behavior anchor underneath of these. Like if senior leaders aren't setting unclear expectations, that's a behavior, right? People not bringing problems up to that's a behavior. There's a lot of things that are around behavior, but why do some people bring up problems and others don't? Why are some leaders good at setting directions and others aren't? Right? What happens there? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go deeper, and we're going to go below behavior, because this is the part for me I want you all, as we're going through this, I want you to think about this almost at three levels, actually. I want you to think about it at the level of you yourself, where you like as we go through this, think about yourself and where you may fall in some of these places. When you think about relationships you have with other people, I always use my husband. Anytime I'm doing anything, I think about, oh, this is probably why we have tension. And I want you to think about the team, right? This is the sort of three things. And those of you that are really, if you're a CHR in the room, Esther, people like you, think about what is this meaning for the executive team and the impact on the organization, right? So we're going to go deeper into this. Here's the game plan. We're going to go beyond behavior and look at this idea of motivational energy and the impact of motivational energy on our ability to hit our goals. We're going to look at what it looks like in practice. So I've got a real life case study. This is a group from several years ago that we worked with, and it'll really allow you to kind of see this thing come to life based on the actual goals that they were tasked with, but also the challenges that they were facing. And then we're going to look at how you can maybe take some steps forward on your own to take some action. So that's the game plan. All right. So you had, as part of this, and I think it might be helpful, Claudia, if you could throw it into the chat in case anybody missed it in the pre-work. We'd sent you out some pre-work that would be good for you to just have reference to as we get going into this little case study, but also a reference to this tool that we're going to be looking at. The tool we're going to be using as a platform is a tool called the Individual Directions Inventory. And what it does is it helps people recognize and live in better alignment with their energy drivers. So this is the purpose of it. It's not something you try and change. It is really designed to let people understand what circumstances increase their energy, their emotional energy, what circumstances decrease it, and gives them like really a kind of a measuring stick for what's invisible. We do a lot of things out of habit, right? 95% of what we do is out of habit. Why do we have those habits, right? What's been the internal piece that's been driving us? This is what this tool gives you a sense of. What it doesn't do is whoops, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction here. What it doesn't do is tell you how you spend your time. It doesn't tell you what you're good at. It doesn't tell you what other people like about you or appreciate about you. It doesn't tell you what you have to do. You could have low energy in something and your job might require you to have a lot of energy for that particular task and activity. Often when we're asked to coach leaders, our specialty area of coaching is behavioral coaching. And so we use this tool in coaching to get underneath why the person hasn't been able to sustain and maintain their behavior. And I think all of you have been around and you know yourself, you probably worked with people, they got a ton of feedback. They were good for a while. This is what we say, they were good for a while, and then they slip back into old patterns. Why is that? Well, it's probably the motivational energy to be able to maintain that behavior is really tough, right? So that's what it also helps people understand. How are you gonna, if your job requires it, how are you gonna come at that when you really don't want to have to do it, right? It doesn't tell us what we should be doing, and it's not gonna tell us how you're currently behaving. So, and I have to watch myself with this. Sometimes I'll kind of slip into behavioral language when I talk about this tool. There's definitely a correlation where you have a lot of energy for something, you will tend to do things, behave in ways that align to that energy, right? So, but it really is really giving us the underlying motivator. So sometimes you see people behaving a certain way, and that's actually really a learned behavior. It's not really something that they love doing, but they know they have to do it, and they just do it because that's what's expected of them. But it doesn't mean they're getting emotional energy from it. So I want you to kind of really anchor into this idea. It's really about how it makes you feel inside, right? What's the juice you get out of this? So we talked about this. This really tool allows you, it's a 3-level tool in my mind. It allows you to know yourself, know your teammates, and know your team. So we're going to look at it really through the team lens today primarily. We are going to look at some of the relational pieces between the leader of this team and a couple of his key team members, because it was sort of the root of a lot of the challenges for this team. And so you'll see kind of how it starts to come together when you start building it up through these layers. So here's the IDI at a glance. This would be on, I think, the second page of the handout that we sent you, the really clear definitions of each of the behaviors, but they're essentially in motivational clusters. The first one is affiliating, which is a number of motivational directions that are around intimacy and relationships. How much do you put into that? What are the things about, building strong, close personal bonds that are important for you? The next category is perceiving, which is how is, I call it like kind of thinking, feeling kind of category where, it's sort of the left brain, right brain. Oh, and sorry, I missed attracting. Attracting is how you like to get attention to yourself, right? Are you somebody who likes a lot of attention, and how do you like that kind of attention? Mastering is gaining mastery over your environment, right? So, what do you do to get better at things? Challenging is the forceful set of motivational energies. You'll see like the word winning is in the challenging energy, and it's really how assertive you come into the world. And then maintaining is really that striving to maintain those personal boundaries and how you do that. And so we're going to you'll see these in a bit more detail as we go into it. But each one kind of work together, as you'll see. So they don't kind of work in isolation. You can have high energy in one area, low energy in the other. You could have a colleague who has the same high energy as you, but they have actually high energy in another area. It's gonna look and feel differently, right? So when it comes to the scoring, just to get you oriented to it and how this tool works, it will give people a score on a scale of 0 to 100. And when you get your scores as an individual, you kind of look at it, and if you were this individual, you would see that you're at the 80th percentile on this dimension, which means that in the database that you have been normed against, you are 79 people do not feel as strongly about this as you do. And there's another 19 people who actually feel more strongly about it, right? It gives you a sense of, and I think this is where I say to people as they do their IDI, in the meetings where you get your back up, or you get really fired up, like that's the emotional energy, right? You're really angry. And you walk out and you say to a colleague, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was what happened in there. And your colleague looks at you like, what are you talking about? Right? That's just a great opportunity to reflect on, okay, what was triggering me? We use the word trigger a lot. These are the places that we can get triggered, right? Because where we see very high scores, 70% of above, that's where you get a lot of energy. I'll often say to people, it's like your favorite food. If you love pizza, you could eat pizza, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, never get bored of it. You love pizza, right? If you can't stand pizza, could you choke the occasional slice down? Yes, you could. Would you ever think to order pizza late at night? No, you don't. You don't. It doesn't even occur to you that pizza might be something other people might like. That's the low energy score, right? It's almost like a blind spot to some degree. And so that's where bias lives. So we have this bias. We think everybody sees the world in these ways. And that's where this can be really helpful to help people understand their perspective on the situation might not be the reality of the situation, right? Or what they're considering as unimportant might be very important to somebody else. So the low score, and this is where tensions can occur with people, is when we have that extreme. The mid-range is more situational. So when we see people's reports and they're like 40% or 70% or things like that, it really is more about, in your personal life, in your work life, in this type of situation versus that type of situation, how does it manifest? We have a colleague, Leah and I, who's quite low on winning. Um, and I'm quite high on winning. So in our firm, I kind of get labeled as the person who needs to win all the time. And my colleague doesn't. And we were at our offsite a couple of years ago, and she and I were partnered up playing a card game, and we won. And you know who played We Are the Champions on her iPhone? It wasn't me, was it, Leah? It
No.
was not me. It was her. So even though she's 30% winning on this report, in certain situations, her winning comes out really big time, right? So
I
I
feel
think,
like that might have been another energy of entertaining as
oh,
well,
it could have
kicking
been
in.
two. Could have been two. She's got high entertaining as well. So that's what we sort of want to keep in mind too. Is just because you're low on something, it doesn't mean it never shows up for you, but it's probably a little bit more situational. Whereas my high winning, it's the bane of my existence. It drives me bonkers. I always joke that if you and I are at the stoplight, there is no way you are beating me out of that stoplight. Like I'm like Mario Andretti. For those of you who remember that name, I'm gone, right? That is the, and then so it also means when I lose, I ruminate on that forever. I can think of arguments from 20 years ago that I still think about, and I have a better way of going at it, right? Surprise. it drives me nuts, right? So this is the thing about energy. When we're really high, we're overusing it in some ways. And what we find too is that they look at the tail scores. So the tail scores are where you score 85 or higher and 15 below. And those are often very automatic habitual responses. And that is truly where we're in bias territory at those very high end scores. So something to really start to look at. And when I work with clients, usually we can track the thread back to something in their childhood, the way they were brought up, the values that were instilled, their experiences early on in life that started to set the neural pathways around this is what good feels like, this is what bad feels like. Right. So we start to kind of see patterns, and the whole point of it is not to change it though. So we want to think about this tool like a lot of tools. You're trying to change something. You have a 360, you're trying to change it. You're trying to change your behavior. When you get a personality report like DISC or colors or Myers-Briggs, you're trying to understand, okay, if I'm a J, when do I need to be more P? Or if I'm an N, when do I have to be more S, right? This is not like that. The high scores are not inherently good. Low scores are not inherently bad. The whole point of this is just to understand it a little bit more. So this is what a report would look like for an individual. I know it's probably a little small. Hopefully none of you are watching this on your phone because it would be really small. But what we look at is where is the low energy? So we really look at that kind of low end, and we look at the high end to see where the scores are. And you can just even see really quickly from this report, this individual gets a lot of energy from that affiliating bucket, right? So this is a person who really builds relationships, likes that kind of, supportive environment, likes to help other people, likes being part of a team. And then we look at their low side, the thinking, right? Low creating, low interpreting. The excelling is low, the winning is low. So you kind of get a sense this is maybe somebody who's maybe more action oriented, doesn't like to spend a lot of time thinking about things, kind of is probably okay to let certain things go, doesn't feel the need to make it perfect, and probably really values harmony. So this is somebody who that low winning is really relationship focused, maybe even hypersensitive to what they perceive to be conflict, because that low winning is really about, like less inclined to want to kind of battle it out and take that really assertive stance that the winning energy kind of brings in. So that's the tool. We also then get a team view. So we're here to talk about the team view. And again, with the team, we're now getting kind of the aggregate. So those smaller dots are kind of like the aggregate of the data of the team. But in this team, we see a team that's got a lot of energy around gaining stature and entertaining, which is really that recognition. Look at me, I'm wanting, a lot of sort of accolades probably for the work I'm doing. And also a lot of sort of expressing on that team and giving on that team. So a team that likes to share what's on their mind really freely, likes to help each other. But maybe on the bottom end, we're seeing low excelling, lower structuring, lower controlling, and lower approachability, which are all energies. So that excelling, again, that's about setting that high bar. The structuring is about having, like really enjoying putting things into process. Controlling is really about directing the efforts of other people. Like it's like being a boss and a leader. And then irreproachability is really sort of having this code of conduct that you do things the right way, right? When we're lower on irreproachability, we're a little bit more in the gray on things, right? Might be a little bit more, I want to say, not flexible, because you could be flexible, but it's almost a little bit like, okay, I'll see what makes sense in the moment, versus somebody who's higher approachability has a very strong sense of, no, this is my internal compass. And if I'm wanting to stay on the path, I'm going to stay with this sort of, clear set of principles for myself. So in the team dynamic, we start to see how do those energies affect the team given what they have to do and given what they're looking at. So that's the tool. I just want to pause, see if there's any questions that are coming up for you right now about it before we jump into the case study. So anything that's coming up that you're like, didn't quite get that, Glenn. I don't really think I understand this tool. Or those of you who maybe have used the tool, if there's anything that you would add about the IDI that you'd share with the group, you can come off mute and do that. I know a few of you have done it.
I'll say something.
Yeah, Randy, do it.
I think that I've done the tool with you, Glenn, and I think that the first time you see it, it's very hard not to kind of look at, okay, a high score is good, a low score is bad.
So
And what
true.
it does is it makes you really, at least for me, it made me really look at myself and say, oh, if I'm this, that's not a good thing for a leader. And it really, you really need to kind of go through it and talk it out because otherwise, when you just see numbers on a score plotted, you kind of start thinking about all of your own, well, this is bad, or this is harmful, or it really can do a mess with your head. So so you really need to have someone who is very understanding of how this works so that you can really appreciate what it tells you. And then you
Mm,
realize that when you go through other evaluations, how everything links. On its
yeah.
own, it's a nice picture, but without other things looking at it, it's just information on a page. But when you see it with other evaluations, then you could kind of say, okay, now I get it and I understand why. And when you get certain feedback, I see where that's happening. So it really has to be all encompassing and not just done, in my opinion, singularly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, this isn't like, you can do your Myers-Briggs online and get, you're an ENTJ and you can kind of move on with your life or whatever, right? Because what do we do when we get those assessments, right? We go, yay, I'm an ENTJ, I'm the best, I'm a red, I'm a this, I'm a that. And you look at all the positive aspects of that stuff and you kind of downplay all the stuff that's the not so nice side of those behavioral or those personality assessments. This for sure is very multi-layered. And that's what I actually love about it. I love this tool because I call it the gift that keeps on giving. It's something that, the more you start to understand yourself, the more you can kind of manage your own triggers, the more you can kind of really understand what makes you happy. Why am I unhappy at work right now? So there's a whole other kind of set of tools you can look at with the IDI, career coaching. Those of you that are independent coaches, yeah, you can use this in career coaching. You can use it in leadership coaching, internal talent professionals, lots of places that you can do it. We actually use it in our hiring process to make sure that, a lot of the energy is going to align with the main responsibilities in the person's job, just to see how that's going to work. So lots of places that you can use the tool, but not something that you want to kind of take lightly for sure, to your point, Randy. Heather, what do you want to add?
Thanks, Klein. So what was interesting about the IDI just on its own without the LEA is uh, even the lower scores or the higher scores if it's overused in some cases. But what it helped me to do personally was understand where my energy can get drained
Mm,
and then even just shifting my schedule. So data analysis, deep thinking, like I have to do that in the morning because that's when I'm at my best.
mhm.
Whereas in the afternoon, I could never, it would just even exhaust me even more. So even
Yeah.
leveraging the IDI as a tool to help influence ways of working individually, right? Or
Hmm.
collectively as a team, et cetera. So I found it super helpful in the corporate world, but also as I ventured out into the entrepreneurial space.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it really does. I think that's how I use it when I've had a couple of weeks where I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to quit my job, which is very hard when you're the owner of the company. But let me tell you, newsflash, like even owners of companies want to quit their jobs sometimes. I can look at my IDI energy and I can see how I've been spending the 2 weeks prior. And I know exactly what I need to do to shift things up and mix things up and get myself back in the place where I am aligned with what feeds me, right? So from a self perspective, really fantastic. Lots of application from a career perspective, from a leadership development perspective. I think really lots of great places you can use it. So let's go into this case study and this team. So hopefully everybody's got the case study handy and the things handy. Does anybody not have that? Um,
It is in the chat.
Great.
Claudia did put it in the chat, and we can, if you just joined, it might not be visible in your chat. So just let us know and we'll reload it again.
Yeah. So, yeah, let us know if you can't see it because it might be handy for you to have just the definitions of the energy pieces as we go through it. And I just want to be really clear, like we're assessment neutral at the roundtable. We definitely work with management research group and Heather just mentioned their LEA tool. That's their 360 instrument that this really ties in nicely to. But honestly, like I think for me, what I want to share with all of you is more of this idea. Like I'm I don't know if there's other motivational assessments as standalone like this one out there, but it's just really the value of finding something like this to have deeper conversations, right, with individuals, but within teams. So we're going to look at this case study. And so here's the scenario. I'll do kind of a quick recap with maybe some verbal, because we gave you kind of the short piece of it. So this is a global company. The global executive team, extremely demanding. Those of you who know your colors, let's see, red energy, blue energy, which so red is very like that driver, 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 and blue is very analytical. CFO as the CEO. So you can kind of see the tone of this. This is the group, and a company that was under a lot of pressure, and had quite a few sort of restructuring changes. And one of the big restructuring things that they did, and those of you who've been in big companies, you probably have been to this rodeo a few times yourself, where it's like, we're going to centralize the function. Now we're going to decentralize the function. Okay, now that didn't work. Let's centralize it again, right? We go back and forth in these sorts of like things, right? So that's what they'd done. And they had recently, they had a Canadian group and a US group. And then what they decided to do is to create a North American group. So they had two leaders that were leading the Canadian US. And instead of pushing one of them up, they brought in somebody else who'd had a prior relationship with the CEO. They brought in somebody else to step in and then build this team together. So new leader, newly founded position, and they had very aggressive growth targets, very aggressive. So on top of that, like, let's do a restructuring, let's move people around. Oh, and by the way, we're going to grow by X%. If you've been there, done that, throw it in the chat. Let's not take any time to level set. Let's just go. I often do analogies to weight loss. And I think in weight loss, the thing is like, you got to plateau every once in a while so that you can then keep losing weight. Companies don't like to go hit any plateau, right? We want to just keep moving, moving, moving. So the structure was there was 8 cross-functional direct reports for this new leader, including now the 2 division heads. So where they'd been Canada North and Canada US, now they were division heads of the brands. So there was 2 specific brands. Now they were both presidents of these brands. And then there was the CFO who sort of acted, kind of as the neutral third party. And we had HR, we had supply chain, and sales was actually shared between 2. So sort of this shared services with these 2 division heads who had their own marketing functions and had their own supply chain functions to some degree, but then also the centralized piece. So they were really working through a lot of that. And they had a lot of supply chain and staffing challenges. So there'd been a lot of open roles, a lot of things that people were kind of struggling with. And so that's the scenario. Any questions about any of that before we start getting into this team? Any additional background people feel like they'd like to have to kind of help ground themselves in this? We're good? All right, we'll pop them in if there's anything that comes up. So, of course, we'd been doing a little bit of work with that team. I was coaching one of the presidents in that team at the time, and I get a call, and you know what the call is? It's HR to the rescue, right? This is this is what happens, right? We got HR is going to fix the problem, and this and my thing is always I have this moment where I'm like, okay, I think I might have made a huge mistake here, because anybody who's on a team knows that anytime you get team things outsourced to human resources, it's tricky. It's tricky, right? So I just want to kind of put that out there for all the talent folks, right? Don't put yourself in the situation where you're the hero who's going to fix this leader's team. It's a tricky role to play. You really want it to come from, if you work with a CEO or if you're working with a division leader, make sure you're getting it from them, right? So the key team goals for this team were to create efficiency. They wanted to meet their growth targets. And this was really the mandate of the the new leader was to build that cohesive leadership team, like really had to build that cohesive leadership team. And so what we were hearing when I was doing interviews with the team were these kinds of things. We don't do change well. We're really siloed. People are exhausted. We've got too many goals. They're a bunch of control freaks. This came from somebody on the leadership team. It's not from people below. This was a peer of the group. He takes up a lot of airtime. The senior executive team are tough. I'm focusing on my team, right? So this was kind of some of the things that were happening with or they were not operating as a team, right? They were not operating as a team. And so the challenges that they were facing were burnout. They were getting not great traction on their change plan. And the new leader felt there was a really big issue with poor collaboration and trust. And I would say if I were to rank those from his perspective, that was the top problem. Like if we had better collaboration and trust, the other two issues would take care of themselves. So again, reminding that the IDI is measuring these different aspects. Let's take a look at this team's energy, where they got high energy from and where they got low energy from, and how that might start to affect some of these team targets. So the first set where they had high energy was excelling and enduring. So excelling is really about achieving at the highest levels. It is having challenging goals, right? Very high aspirations, and really demanding that of other people. Often when I see leaders with very high excelling, I'll ask them, has anybody ever really impressed you? Have you really ever had your socks blown off by a lot of people, right? And you know what? Most of the time they go, not really, right? It takes a lot to impress super high excelling people. And they're often very hard on themselves. Like they are the people that always feel they could have done better. So this is sort of the hard thing about that high excelling energy is there's this feeling that we could have done better. We could have been better. What could I have done differently, right? This sort of ruminating. So this is how energy manifests within us. It's an internal thing, right? About what do you ruminate on? There's probably a lot of energy you have in that area, right? The other one that they were really high on was enduring, right? So that's about being persistent. That's really about that tenacity, being determined, having a lot of willpower. Leah and I call it the elbow crawl. I love the elbow crawl, the harder the better, right? Really high on those two energy pieces. And then the other energy that was really high for this group was winning, the winning and controlling energies. So winning is about competing, being triumphant. I shared my story about I'm going to beat you out of the gate at the stoplight. Really hating to lose, hating to lose. And then controlling is about, people don't like this word because they think it's about control freak. The person who said this, when we get to it, I'll share kind of, well, actually, while I'm right here, the person who said in my one-to-one interviews, they're a bunch of control freaks. I don't know if you guys can see the little numbers here or not on the screen, but if you can see a lot of the group are up at that high side. And then there's one little person way down at the bottom there. That was the person who said they're a bunch of control freaks. Because when you're lower on controlling energy, people who are high on controlling energy, they like kind of directing other people. They're good being the boss. They'll make the tough calls. They have a lot of energy. They'll be the ones who, I call them sometimes the glue, right? They'll see where pieces are falling apart and pull the team together to say, okay, guys, we've got to fix this. There's something that needs to get done here. They also, frankly, take too much accountability for things. That's the hard thing with high controlling, is that you take too much responsibility, which means if you don't see something moving fast enough, or you don't see something being done the way you want it to be done, you step in and you take over, right? You take ownership for stuff that is not yours to own. And that is the controlling, like for a low controlling energy person, that's what that's going to feel like. You're a control freak. You're stepping in so much. You're jumping in on this. Leah, anything you would add about that controlling energy? Since you or I are a little bit different on that.
We're a little bit different. I actually had thoughts on the prior one on the excelling, enduring, but Yeah, I think like you can have a situation where there's too many cooks in the kitchen, is what I
Hmm.
might say. And if everyone's high control and you have high winning energy, then the likelihood of being willing to have collaboration where there's a need to give and take, reprioritize, someone doesn't get what they want, it's going to be a lot lower, right? Like they're going to feel really, and they're going to ruminate on that, perhaps maybe more than someone who's got lower control or lower winning energy.
Hmm. Hmm. So that's their high energy scores. And then the last one that came up was this independence piece. And so people with very high independence um, really enjoy being self-sufficient. Like they like being self-reliant, having freedom from interference, making sure there's very little dependence on other people. They don't want to be dependent on others. They prefer to do things on their own. Whenever I see leaders in very big matrixed organizations with very high independence, a lot of the stuff they complain about is stuff that's just standard practice for a big organization. You got to get a deck together for the board. You got to do this, you got to do that. They'll be the ones that will complain the most about that kind of thing. People with low independence, it doesn't bother them as much, right? It's like, okay, this is just part of the job. I'm going to do it. Time freedom and being self-reliant is kind of the big driver for a high independence kind of individual. So you can see that team, right, has a lot of that high independence. So looking at the high energy scores, and I'm going to give you a minute to think about this. So we've got a team with high excelling, right? Setting that bar high, high enduring, we're going to stick at it. High winning, we want to win. We want to, come out on top. And we're willing to take command and drive the team forward to do that. And we're high independence, right? How do you think that might help them with their goals of creating efficiency or meeting their growth targets or building that cohesive team? What energy assets do you see in this mix here that might help them with some of these things? Feel free to throw it in the chat or to shout it out.
I think the winning and the excelling should help them meet growth targets.
Mm,
Mhm.
But as much,
yeah,
I think that there's that the independence may be the problem with building a cohesive team. It will do the opposite.
I love that you picked up on that. Exactly. That is potentially one of the hindrances. And remember, and also think about the structure. Two division leaders and the CEO. So when we start to look into the CEO and those division leaders, we'll really see how that did impact. So let's hold that thought and see if it plays out, how that independence might play out. Any other things? That was great, Randy. Anybody else see anything else?
Enduring could help with meeting the growth targets as well.
Mm. Yeah, like enduring, you're going to stick at the plan, right? You are just going to keep going. That's got its assets and liabilities too, right? What if you've got the wrong plan? Okay. Any other sort of reflections on this? What about the efficiency? Is there anything here that might help them create more efficiency?
I'll chime in if we don't have anything coming up. What I see in controlling that can sometimes help with efficiencies in terms of spotting the connections that need to be
Mm,
made and the links
yeah.
along the way. The lower, myself included, lower control energy can be biased toward, well, I got my piece done,
Yes.
versus the entire ecosystem.
Yes. For sure. I think that can definitely lie in. And the other one I would add in is excelling, right? Like how
Yeah.
can we make it better? Right? How can we improve efficiency? Could see a lot of those conversations happening. Okay. So I don't know. I've got weird bill tapping. Sorry, guys. So let's talk about the team challenges. Randy called out one, that high independence might be contributing to this poor collaboration and trust that they're having. What about burnout and slow traction? What do you think might be actually not helping them or contributing to this feeling of burnout or them not getting traction on things?
Winning potentially,
Yeah, say more, Susan.
um, because I'm just reading the definition, if you will,
Mm,
competing aggressively, that part might, the aggressive piece might contribute to the burnout.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, everything's a fight or feels like a fight.
Yes.
yeah,
Hating to lose, being triumphant and
yeah,
forceful piece.
yeah, for sure. Tanya, what do you think?
I agree with the winning. I also think controlling can be very um, tiring because you might be doing one thing and then somebody comes in and tries to move it another way, and then you think,
Mm,
why am I even doing this? Because I'm doing it wrong. And so you go do what you need to do. And
yeah,
that,
I love that combo actually of the independence and controlling, right? Especially if you're in that, think of those people that are in the middle and they've got those two division presidents, right? Like, what way am I being pulled? And do I think I have my thing that I want to do better? And so the tensions that could happen could really contribute to burnout, but also slow the traction on a change plan, right? That's going to slow the traction on a change plan. If we've got individuals who all think that this is the direction we're going and are driving it forward with that high controlling energy, that could really contribute. Any other sort of observations of this group, these high scores?
Heather, you unmuted yourself. Are you gonna chime in?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking like for the team's burnout, this notion around poor collaboration or trust, there's a disconnect. They're so, high winning, high enduring, high excelling, and high independence. It can actually be interfering with the human side of leadership around the affiliating piece and sort of
Mm,
pausing long enough to check in with their teams and making sure things are clear and priorities are understood and milestones are accomplished. So there could be a structure piece, I'm guessing, but there could be a structure opportunity in addition to really leaning into the affiliating
Mhm.
areas to
mhm,
support
Yeah.
this poor collaboration, trust, and burnout.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I love that
If
insight.
I might build on that just real quick is what I see often is that combo of excelling, enduring, and enduring alone is that there's a never-ending supply of ambitious goals that get added. And with that enduring is that, well, they all need to be achieved and achieved with excellence. And so nothing is dropped off the list. It's just that, and so that's exhausting for the organization. And then that would likely contribute to slow traction because there's only so many individuals to do the work. And so at some point something has to give. So that double whammy of excelling and enduring can be really challenging for teams because it feels awful to take something off the list then too.
Yeah, it's hard and throw winning on there, right? Like it's
Yeah,
hard to
yeah.
admit defeat, right? Like if you pair those three together, that's a team that really, once they set a goal and they're going for it, to convince them to back off of that goal is tricky, right? So let's now look at the low energy. So, and I love that all of you are kind of seeing this, right? Like how high energy can contribute to both the potential success, but also the potential challenges if it's really high and overused. And so when we look at low energy, here were their low energy scores. So creating was low and structuring was low. So more members of the team didn't have as much energy for thinking in original ways, being an innovator, being creative and imaginative, and exploring those sort of different perspectives, different ways of doing things, right? This is a team that was much more action oriented. These the creating and the other measure in this particular bucket, perceiving bucket, is interpreting. Interpreting, I always say it's kind of your right brain and left brain, right? How much energy do you have from right brain, this creating piece, and left brain analytical thinking and that type of thing. And often leaders, when they get the results, this will be a big triggering thing for a lot of people because they can score very low, right, on these particular drivers, I should say. And it doesn't mean they can't think. I've met PhDs with low interpreting energy, right? I've met people who lead really interesting businesses with low creating energy. They come at there's no one pathway to success. They get their success for other things. They might have high excelling, they might have high gaining stature, they might have other things that are driving them forward. So we want to really make sure that we are not judging people for that. But this team was the kind of team that if you spent too much time in brainstorming, they wanted to move on. How do we action this, right? You may be somebody like that. You may sit in those meetings and think, oh God, this is such a waste of time. Well, come on, guys, let's go. We had a colleague here for years. A lot of you know her, Susan McKenzie. She was 30 percentile on creating. I'm 96 percentile on creating. And Susan would say to me, Line, do not have a brainstorming session at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I can't handle it, right? I can have a brainstorming session any time of day, even if I'm like super exhausted and you have a problem and you want to bounce it off of me. I am here for it. I am here for it. But we used to call Susan Mic Drop Susan, because when she was in those brainstorming meetings, she would be the one who would then come up with the one idea, but then she was done. Like, okay, I've contributed my big idea, I'm out, right? So creating energy, that's how it can often manifest, right? Within a team, and on a team that's collectively leaning in this direction, you can see how potentially they're not spending a whole lot of time looking for novelty. They're focused on doing, right? The other piece is structuring. So people with high structuring energy, and I know Dee Sermon's on this call, and Dee is the queen, I think, of this energy for sure, and so is Heather. Just that ability to kind of put things in a plan, be efficient, be organized, meticulous about that. These are people who have never met an Excel sheet that they haven't liked or been able to kind of quickly put ideas into, and like that for me, I'm at the 5th percentile in that. So I appreciate people like that so much. I love those people, right? But this is a team, again, lower on that structuring energy, collectively lower, right? You can see sort of the people that are higher up on that. And I always think about when you see that, how do we hear the voices in the room who are bringing in that different energy when collectively everybody's leaning in a certain direction? So let's talk about these low energy scores and how might they support the team's goals? How could these be maybe beneficial when we think about creating efficiency or meeting the growth targets or building this cohesive team? They may support, they may not support. But what do you think might be some of the ways that having lower creating energy and lower structuring energy might be beneficial? I think.
I think that they'll be able to look at tried and true methodology versus always trying to look for the next best thing.
Yeah.
Good ad.
Yeah. Like, so maybe it's like, hey, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's make this better.
And so
right?
I think the low structuring, I find it interesting that they have both low creating and low structuring, because to me, I feel that they're like opposites. So the fact that they're both low, I find that a bit surprising when I read the definitions. But
I know.
don't be so much fighting about it. Like, you know what? Let's try it. You know what I mean? You don't, it doesn't have to be a certain way. There's maybe a little bit more openness, but maybe it's a certain way.
Yeah, maybe there's some agility in trying a new thing, right? Like we don't need to have the plan all buttoned down for this. Let's just give it a go, right? See what happens. That can be the benefit of that lower structuring piece for sure. Okay, let's go on to the next one, to the challenges, right? So how might the scores contribute to the team's challenges? How could creating low structuring be causing some of these problems that they're experiencing around burnout, slow traction on their change plans? Remember that quote, we don't do change well. And maybe the poor collaboration and trust. What do you think?
If they're low on structuring, they may not be able to build the plan to get traction, right?
You
and
got
so
it.
that's probably contributing there.
You got it. Totally. Like not even having a plan, right? That was a big part of the challenge for this team.
And I think that just creates a cycle. Not having a plan contributes to the burnout, contributes to the slow traction, and they get in it and they can't get out of it.
Yeah. And then pair that with their high scores, right? Demanding targets. Let's go. We got to win. But what's the plan?
Yeah.
Right? Where are we going? How are we going to measure success, right? That is what absolutely was kind of a big root of a lot of the burnout problems here. Even team meetings, right? If you think about a team meeting cadence, I will tell you that every company I work with, I can't think of one where I've walked in there and they've got a really great team meeting cadence. Everybody complains about meetings. Meetings are a problem. That's a structure issue. That's structure. What's the rhythm of your meetings? What's the purpose of the meetings? What's the focus of the meetings? Who needs to be at the meetings, right? What's the objective of this meeting? But people get into these systems, and I think that's where low creating can come in, even around a thing like a meeting structure rhythm. Oh, well, we've done this way forever. We always have this meeting. Had it for 10 years. We all keep going to it. We got it, you know, like this is where teams get stuck in this sort of mud, has been my observation.
Yeah. Go ahead, Randy.
Everything we've been saying, from what, from all of the different behaviors, the trust and collaboration hasn't really been tackled. And I think that while it's not a behavior per se, poor collaboration and trust, I think that that is something that has to be dealt with in this scenario, in this case study, because then you could be open about what the problems are. You can about what the challenges are. You could open your kimono and say, look, I don't know how to improve it, but I know it needs to be improved. Without that at the baseline, I think all the other challenges that they're facing can't even begin to be tackled.
100%. 100%. And we'll also talk about, we're going to talk about bias and the bias of the leader in a minute when we look at the leader score in comparison to the team score. Because those of you that are team leaders, here's what you need to know. You're affecting your team. Your biases are affecting your team. What you're putting attention to as a result of where you get energy is going to affect a lot of the things within the team. So we're going to see that when we start to look at, okay, this team leader, this new team leader, where was his biases? Where was it helpful? But where did he actually contribute, right, to some of the challenges that were being faced? Any other sort of comments about the low energy scores before we move on? No? Okay. So I thought I think we've touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to share some of the energy recipes because energy doesn't work in like a little isolated thing, right? And so when we look at the burnout piece, what's really sort of driving a lot of that, I think we touched on all of them, but the big factors are this high excelling, high enduring, high winning, right? High independence, low structuring. That pot. You can just see how an executive team that's operating like that with these really demanding targets doesn't want to back down from them, but isn't really putting a lot of thought into how we're going to make it happen, right? And is high independence, where I'm going to kind of go do it my way, or the way I think it needs to be done, can contribute to burnout, right? Can really sort of create that swirl for people below. The slow traction, we talked about this, right? The creating the structuring is a big part of it. Like low creating, low structuring, are we looking at new ways of doing things? Are we trying things differently? What are we, and do we have a plan to implement a new change to see if it's actually going to work? The enduring energy being high affects this because it actually makes people a bit more rigid and no, that was the plan we set and I don't want to have to think of a new plan, right? So we're just going to go, right? So it creates this piece where we don't have this really thoughtful plan to begin with, but we've got a lot of leaders who are like, because they don't want to think about it anymore, we're going to stick with what we've got, right? Make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's
We've
another
got some conversation on the chat as well, Glenn. Yeah. Making sense.
Oh yeah, Dee, burnout is a tremendous barrier to thinking of ways of doing things differently. So true, right? And I felt really badly for the people because I worked with that team, that leadership team, and then I also worked with one of the division teams. And you just saw how it started to cascade down and in, right? It starts to permeate the organization. It's tricky. So the collaboration and trust, as Randy sort of called out this one, part of the things that were fraying around this was you had people that were very big on sticking to their way of doing things with that enduring and independence combo and wanting to win. And so you get sort of, not a lot of collaboration when you have leaders that have a lot of that energy. Fun fact, high controlling leaders, and I should have actually probably put controlling in this bucket too, actually, is one of the contributing recipe parts to this bucket. High controlling leaders often clash with other high controlling leaders, right? And so one of the key things, if you're seeing that within teams where you've got two leaders that just, and especially if they're almost set up to be competitive, a lot of senior leaders are high winning, high controlling. They just are. It's sort of what we tend to value and promote in organizations are often those kinds of energies that drive. The challenge, though, is you're going to really have to be clear on roles and responsibilities, make sure people know who has decision rights. All of those kinds of things become pretty critical. Make sure there's alignment around that so that you don't run into conflict, right? With teams, two big levers, alignment and dynamics. We often focus on the dynamics first. We often get asked to do the IDI for team dynamics, but I always start with people say, but what's the alignment? Because alignment will solve for a lot of the dynamics problems. And then the IDI can be a great enhancement for the team to understand why those tensions come into play so that they can work better together when those things start to come up. So I'm thinking about that. But let's talk about the team leader effect, because as collaborative as you want to be as a leader, or you kind of pride yourself on building that kind of culture, you are going to have, we say leaders cast a long shadow. This is the energy shadow, right? That we potentially cast as a team leader. So here's the team leader's profile. So just look at those affiliating scores. 95, you probably can't read them, but like 95% giving, 85% receiving. This is about like liking a supportive, affectionate environment, liking being helped, right? Likes to help, likes being helped. 90% belonging, 99% expressing. There was a comment in my earlier thing, he sucks the air out of the room. That was directed at the team leader. 99% expressing, really sharing. When we would sit in meetings, he would talk for probably, if it was an hour, he would talk for 45 minutes, right? And then excelling and enduring, that's about setting those high ambitious targets. He's one of the leaders, right? Very, very high excelling, 95%, very high enduring, 85%, right? Very tenacious. Any surprises about this? Or I shouldn't say surprises, anything you're curious, additional curiosity things about this leader? Before I go into his next scores? No? He's a really nice guy, I would say.
think Dee, were you asking a question?
Oh.
You're on mute still.
Yeah, I hit it, but then it didn't work.
Yeah.
My curiosity here is around the goals and set ambitious goals and that kind of thing. And my curiosity comes in around what linked to the collaboration. Is there any kind of collaboration with others around what is actually achievable or not? So again, great that this is the where this leader comes from, but again, when collaboration is one of those things that is an opportunity area, how is that leader then linking in with others and getting other points of view, supporting collaboration? So that's just something that popped up for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so let's put ourselves in the shoes of this leader who is actually reporting into this very demanding global team, right? That is actually the one setting the targets, right? How likely is this leader actually going to push back on their boss with this kind of profile versus wanting to achieve, right? Not being willing to, like, we can do this, right? That was actually more of the dynamic, was that up. So we have to think about that, right? Like, because the power relationship exists, right? It always exists, unless you're like a founder like me. I have a power relationship with myself that is often dysfunctional, right? But most of us are reporting up. If we're a CEO, we're reporting to a board, right? There is always something. And so how does our energy affect us when we're in those relationships? And what are we doing to want to kind of set that versus in our biases? Because again, like 85% was his lowest score here. We're in bias territory heavily on these things. Asset, for sure, super successful executive, great career. However, you can see how probably didn't want to ever back down from a challenge, right?
I see it, sorry, I see it a little differently. Yes, they don't want to back down from a challenge, but they, because of their high affiliating scores, they really want to please their leader. They really are in that people pleaser for the leader. So
Yes.
maybe trying to do that, they're forgetting the impact it has on the team because really managing up, even without necessarily realizing the impact that they have on their team with the skills.
Yeah, totally. And also I think though too, like the high belonging, right? That's the team energy. I like being part of a team. Really wanted to win as a team, but really believed they could win as a team because that high excelling, right, kicks in, right? Sometimes we're like, one of my issues is I'm optimistic to the point of delusional. I think this was like, sometimes we see leaders that are just really optimistic. They think they can do everything and they think the team's going to be able to do it. No malicious intent at all. It's the belief they have. Where does that belief come from? Where we put our energy, right? So let's look at this leader's lower energy profiles, like the lower energy scores. Look at that creating and interpreting, 10% creating, 15% interpreting. This is a highly action-oriented leader. Didn't want to be bothered with a lot of thinking, right? Complaints from the team would be that they would take things into him to talk about, and he really wouldn't help them make decisions on things, right? He was more focused. Remember I said to you, if I were to rank them, he was more focused on the trust and relationships of the team that occurred within the team. That was where his focus went. So when they're one-with-ones, he wanted to spend all kinds of time coaching them. He loved being a coach, that high affiliating energy, loved being the coach, right, to the team. But when it came to, thinking through really critical business decisions, not really where his energy went. Same low structuring, not super organized. I used to observe their meetings as a team coach. I'd observe their meetings and then I'd work with them the next day as the coach. One meeting, I said, who's the chair of this meeting? I had no idea who the chair was. What's the timekeeping? What's the purpose of this meeting? There's a bunch of people in this meeting who haven't even spoken all morning. Like, what's going on here, right? But that structuring energy, thinking through team rhythms, that type of thing, less about that, the plan, that type of thing. And then independence, 5%. This is an individual who didn't really need to be self-sufficient, much more preference towards a supportive team environment. Another kind of fun fact about this, senior executives often score lower on independence because they're willing to kind of put up with the stuff that comes with the territory of being a very senior executive. You don't control your agenda. The company wants you to move from, Australia to North America. Okay, I'm doing it, right? That kind of like not fussed by those kinds of things are often what's helpful. Lower independence energy can often be quite helpful in larger, more complex matrixed organizations. It's, that can be an asset. And so this leader, though, very much on that 5%. But remember, the team's high independence, right? Collectively, right? So now we can see sort of a gap between this individual's energy and the rest of the group. And so let's look at a couple of these relational dynamics. Collaboration, where's that coming from? This team leader, look at that affiliating energy. Huge, 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 huge emphasis on collaboration, wanting people to collaborate together. The team, as we can see, is more mid-range. Didn't have as much of a need for that. So a lot of their complaints was the number of meetings that they had to have with him, the number of times that they were pulled together that they didn't see beneficial when they had a lot of work to do. So there was a real disconnect between what he really valued and wanted to bring into the team and what the team needed. Now let's layer in this independence piece, right? So now we've got 4 people that are scoring 80% and above on independence. And remember, that team leader is down at 5%, right? This is also adding to that dynamic, them feeling like, why do I have to be in that meeting? And he's like, come on, let's all get together and let's all grow together and learn together. Like he was really invested in building the best team. He's a lovely, lovely guy. Really wanted them to be successful and felt that they just needed to break bread and bond and spend time together and do all of those things together, right? The high-end numbers are his 2 division leaders and the CFO. Those are really his prime direct reports, right? Oh, we'll get to that, Randy. Just hold that question. That's the challenge. So now you've got a leader who's saying, let's all get together, and you got 2 individuals on the team going who feel like when you try and help me, you're interfering with my life. That's the combo of people who are very high independence and they're working for people who are very high giving or very high receiving, is that they go, you're trying to help me, you feel like you're interfering. Can you stay out of my backyard, please? I got this, right?
Well, and I
trust collaboration. So when you go back to that collaboration thing, that's what his frustration was that he had 2 division leaders that were great at running their divisions, actually quite successful, but he wanted more collaboration. And the thing that really in that situation, when you're in that situation, then what he needed to do is define where and when and how they needed to collaborate, right? And be really direct about that. Set that expectation. But that's kind of not what he did. And when we look at sort of conflict and where conflict was coming into play, again, he's got all these high affinity energies that are around harmony. But his controlling energy, look at that, it's mid-range. His 2 division leaders were at the 95th percentile on controlling energy, right? They wanted to own stuff, leave me alone, this is my thing. And because he was more in that mid-range and he was more about the harmony, he wasn't stepping in, right? And dealing with things, right? And he wasn't getting them together and he wasn't being that directive with them, because it's kind of like, I always think about, the lower you are on controlling, the more you kind of expect people to act like grown-ups and do what they're supposed to do, right? The more you're on the other end, you kind of expect people not to do that. And that's when you lean in maybe too much, right? So conflict was kind of happening because of his sort of like little bit, not hesitancy, but just he wanted to outsource it. Wanted HR to fix it. He wanted the team coaching process to fix it. He needed to get in and fix it. But he was so relational based. It's hard to have those conversations directly. And that was kind of what, those of you who are in HR and have to support team leaders that are like that are maybe a little conflict averse, those conversations never go really easy, right? When leaders are doing that. And then the last one we'll kind of just touch on is this burnout piece. So there he is, and there the 2 division leaders are. All 3 of them super high excelling, super high enduring. And that was one of the big challenges, and the winning piece, they were all sort of at that high mid side of winning. So you have this challenge where this is as a triad, leading the 2 divisions and then being the head of the division, not wanting to back down, right? And that was what I would hear from the other leaders. It's really hard to convince those 3 to get off the train they're on, right? That became like a really big part of the dynamic for the group. And then all of them were low structuring. All 3 of those people were low structuring. So no wonder people are burning out below, right? Start to see the alignment with these things. So any kind of questions about the profile? I know I went through it pretty quick before we get to what happened to this leader. Any sort of questions or observations that as you look through that team and leader relationship? Good. Okay, so let's throw the poll up there. What do you think happened to this team leader? Was he promoted? Was he reassigned? Or was he ultimately fired? What do you think? Okay, we're getting there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Before I answer the poll. How long did you work with him for, Glyne?
So almost 18 months. 18 months.
Okay.
Okay. So I think the results are all in. So Claudia, we can share those results or in the poll, whatever we do. I don't know if are you guys seeing the poll responses?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, 77% felt that he was reassigned. One person thought that they were promoted, and then 2 of you thought that they were fired, that he was fired. He was fired. He was fired. He could not get the traction within the group. And if I were to say the linchpin challenge for him was that overemphasis, this is where energy, when it's overemphasized, he really did passionately want that team to be well. He invested in them. We were doing all of this teamwork, but it became very evident that he was not able to have the tough conversations. There was a lot of trust issues with the team that he wasn't addressing because of the harmony, right? And the need to kind of keep things nice and smooth. And that just in the end, ultimately again, going back to that very demanding executive team, he just didn't make the traction fast enough on what he needed to make. And people in that senior leadership role were really grumbling. There was a lot of backstabbing that started to happen within that group, right? So, and that's when you start to see teams fall apart. So I think when we think about your team and whether or not you should bring an approach in here to work with a team like this, here's some things that I would think about. So if you're a team leader thinking, oh, maybe I want to do this IDI with my team, or if you're in HR and you're thinking, I'd like to sort of do this with my executive team or the team. Here's what I would say to you. Really think about the readiness of the team, right? Like if you're in, we call the red zone where it's hopeless, the team's disempowered, they're dysfunctional, blah, you got other issues. You got to deal with other things there. You don't do a process like that with a team like that. When you're in the thing of, we call it the blame over ego area, where there's a lot of the directors, if only the directors were doing this. I'll hear executive teams do that. You know the problems, but really the team is not quite there yet to take some accountability. You need to be at the point where you're working with a team where there's I was with a team yesterday, and when I was interviewing the CEO in advance of the team session, he was really candid with me. He said, you know what, I'm a really optimistic guy. And I know my thing is I just believe in people's strengths. And I don't have, I really struggle with holding people accountable. When you have a leader who's like that and who can see that and sees this as something that they want to drive to get better, that's where you can go, can you be a little bit in the yellow zone? Like if it's most of the team is in the light green zone, but some are in the yellow zone. Okay, you can probably do that because you'll bring the others along. But you want to make sure you're kind of in that zone of people are moved beyond blame into awareness, right? They're really more aware of that there's issues. And then what we're trying to do when we bring in tools like this is we're trying to move beyond that, though. We're trying to move beyond the individualistic thing to kind of get to this point of where, hey, it's us. We're collectively together. And that's where we're really going to unleash our potential, right? That's where we're going to be able to really make the biggest impact. So, yeah.
Example you gave us, clearly this individual wasn't dealing with certain issues. I mean,
100%.
But the leaders above this individual, obviously they got them a coach and they wanted this person to improve. But did they themselves kind of say, is there something we need to do to make this person more successful? Or was it really that kind of an organization where it was always on this person?
It was on that person, I would say. Right. And remember, there was previous relationship between that individual, I think. And again, he's so affiliating, he probably missed a lot of red flags, is what I would say. Right. And I think that's where also with teams, sometimes I wasn't one-to-one coaching with that individual. I think sometimes when you have to look at a team solution, think about maybe additional support that the team leader needs or the team members might need. Right? Because you have to sort of start with this, I call it it's the bottom-up approach, right? You've got to have that self-awareness. So the readiness of the team really relates to where's their self-awareness level at. From there, you can bring in a tool like the IDI to create then shared language. Now we've got shared language around the tool, which then builds that team awareness. And then we can get to that active inclusion, right? And build that collective impact together. So just think about that. Where are you and you might need to do some foundational work first. right? Need to make sure that the team is actually a team. That was the other issue they had. And then I just think from there, what you're doing is creating ripples. With a tool like the IDI, you don't want to sort of think this is a one and done. The really benefit for a team is not doing it once at an offsite. The benefit for a team is to continue to come back to this and have the conversations about it and continue to learn from it and adjust and recalibrate as a team, right? And as individuals together. I think the breakthrough, the reason why the CEO wanted to do the IDI with this team was that because I was coaching one of the division leaders, one of the exercises I did was have him do his IDI and her do her IDI. And then we looked at where their energy was, and they had a transformative working relationship as a result of that, right? So when you can have that relational piece going, so we have to be careful, those of us in L&D, that we're not kind of treating tools like this as kind of the flavor of the month. I always think that, we're growth mindset people, right? That's the thing with L&D people. We're like growth mindset, HR people, we're talent. We're very growth mindset. So we often get bored of our solutions before our clients do. Right, and we're on to the next thing. What can we get? Let's put them through the Hogan this year. Let's put them through this year. Let's put them through this AQI. I would just say, look for tools, whatever tool you look for tools that are going to, you can wring a lot of value out of that tool, right? And keep coming back to it to build that muscle for people. I'm going to kind of move through this one. And because I think at the end of the day, really what we're talking about here, when we see the behavior problems within a team, what we need to do, it's just like with individuals, we got to go below the tip of the iceberg to see what's really driving this. If you're having a team with the same issues over and over and over again, and you've got a leader who's open to it, and you've got people who are interested in working together in that ego, like you can get them beyond that ego, getting below the surface is really where the magic happens. So wanted to share kind of options for folks. If you're interested in adding the IDI to this toolkit, we do certifications. I only do it on an on-demand basis. So if you're interested, I'll just shoot me an email and we can talk about it. If you have an offsite group where you'd like to do it, we need a minimum of 4 to do offsite certification or on-site certification. But let me know if this is something you're interested in. You're like, oh, I'd love to add this to my toolkit. No problem. We can get you certified. We're also running a team micro course. Those of you who are team leaders, you can sign up for that. It's free, and it just gives you some tools, not IDI, but other tools around your team that you can work with. And then we've also got kind of a new program that we've been working with, having done a ton of team coaching for years now. We're sort of seeing the same patterns emerge again and again. And so we've been piloting a team development program where if you're a team leader and you want to work with your team on some of the topics you see here, it's like a little learning series just for your team. So if you'd like to learn more about that, reach out to me. We're still kind of doing quite a bit of experimentation with it. So we're looking for people to kind of partner with if you're interested in trying some of that. But a lot of these things are themes, right? Accountability seems to be a big theme for folks these days. And then the last thing I'll say, oh, I've got the wrong slide deck. We have a webinar coming up next week. I was like, why are my slides so messed up? Or we have a webinar next month that I want to put on everybody's radar, which is around inclusive leadership. It's Pride Month next month. And so we've got 3 panelists that are around how can you develop and cultivate inclusive leadership in your organization. So watch for that. We'll send a link out for that, and we will be sending a summary next week of all of this in the slide deck. We can PDF the slide deck for you if you want to have a copy of that handy. But thank you all for a great interactive session today. This was sort of the first of our interactive talent talks. And I know we're right at 10:30, so I'm going to release you all to the rest of your day. But great to see you all. Thank you.